This is a video game called Battlefield 1. It was just released a few weeks ago, and if we take a look at the back here, you can see that it is rated M for mature, and the reasons listed are because of blood, strong language, and violence. I'm sure you've seen on the news from time to time about the release of a new video game that is considered to be violent, and how that violentness of the game could have negative effect on the people who play the game. Over the past few years, there have been questions that have been lingering. Does violence in video games encourage people and minors to act out violently? Whenever there is a violent outbreak caused by people who play video games, there seems to be massive amounts of media coverage about how this violent video game somehow encouraged this person to commit these heinous acts of crime. Is that fair to the video game industry to be blamed for a heinous act of crime that a mere customer of theirs has committed? The wild and out-of-control accusations by the media need to stop. When we talk about the violent acts of crime that have been committed here in the United States and other parts of the world, there are multiple different reasons why a person could commit these violent acts. So why is it that video games seem to be a huge focus of that? There was the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, which devastated the nation. In 2011 in Norway, there were two separate shootings which were committed by the same person, which resulted in 77 people being killed. After these two events, there was a lot of media coverage about how violent video games played a huge role in what committed these people to make these heinous acts of crime. In return, this caused a lot of outrage amongst people who play video games and who don't. Eddie McCutch, the author of the article "Violent Video Games Don't Lead to an Increase in Violent Crimes," has expressed in his article that people who play video games aren't committing violent acts of crime. He comments in his article that there is no evidence that violent video games have had any effect whatsoever on the crime rates in the United States. McCutch comments about a study called "Violent Video Games and Real-World Violence: Rhetoric versus Data," which was a joint effort between researchers at Villanova University and Rutgers University. The researchers tried to find a correlation between violent video games and the release of those games having any effect on the crime rates. The study found that after the release of a violent video game, crime rates actually decrease. He justifies it by acknowledging that homicide rates and other violent crimes following the months of a popular video game release actually drop. Christopher J. Ferguson is a professor and co-chair at Stenson University, specializing in psychology, and is considered an expert in the field of media violence, video game violence, and violent crime. Ferguson himself has had several of his studies and articles published by many different outlets. One of his articles is posted on Time's website called "Video Games Don't Make Kids Violent." This article was published back in 2011, before this issue had become mainstream. He claims that in his article, even while video game sales have skyrocketed, youth violence has plummeted to its lowest point in 40 years. And he uses this data using government statistics. As I have mentioned previously, Ferguson has conducted a few studies over the years, but one that stands out is a study him and his team did back in November of 2011. The study is summarized by an article written by Keith Stewart of The Guardian, titled "Video Games Are Not Making Us More Violent." In the article, Keith states, consumption of video game violence was measured against violence rates for the previous 20 years. The study concluded that playing video games coincided with a fall in violent crime between the ages groups of 12 and 17. Video games do not cause violence and aggression in people. It has been shown to decrease it, and violent crime rates actually drop after the release of numerous video games. When really looking at the details of it, it is easy to see how the media has blown this issue way out of proportion and has not done their own research into the topic. Every time there is a violent crime that spreads across the nation, the issue of video games is always brought up. People should know the facts, and people should be able to use those facts so that way they can formulate an accurate opinion of their own.